Hello, and welcome to the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we're kicking off a special project. We're going to be covering the last season, Season 7 of the Clone Wars. This launched recently, and we're still going to be continuing our Clone Wars rewatch, in which we're currently in Season 2. But because this has just launched on the Disney Plus channel, and a lot of folks are talking about it, and frankly, I couldn't wait to watch it anymore, I decided that we're going to do a special project starting today, where every day, me and Paul Hoppe, who Superhero Ethics fans will remember, he was the original host of Superhero Ethics, and has been on that pod a couple of times, as well as I believe on at least one Star Wars episode. He and I are every day going to watch one episode, and then record a short podcast about it. So, today we'll start that series. And just to let you know, if you have not yet seen these episodes and don't want to be spoiled, please just skip them. We'll clearly mark them as, new season in the title. You can keep listening to the rewatch of the Clone Wars. And when we get up to Season 7, I'm sure we'll record on those as well. And you can always go back and listen to these again. But for those of you who have seen the newest season of Clone Wars, for those of you who are curious about it and don't mind being spoiled, or for just those who love hearing people talk about Star Wars, here we are, and we're going to talk to you about it right after this commercial break that we have no control over. Welcome back, and Paul, welcome back to you. It's good to have you. You and I really got started with our ethical discussions back when we were kids talking about Star Wars all the time, so I'm really psyched to have you with me for this journey.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
And I'm just going to jump right off and say, it has its problems, obviously, but this is the first really good Star Wars content I've seen in a long time, and I am so happy about it. Just from this first episode, makes me feel like, okay, this is the kind of stuff I've been wanting for a while. I'm looking forward to where the season's going to take us.
I agree. I'd say The Mandalorian is pretty good.
Oh, okay, yeah, actually, no, forget about that. Mandalorian is fantastic.
But aside from that, yes.
In some ways, I feel like Mandalorian is very, very good, but feels very different from the tone of everything else. For sure. And this does,
it's so separate, too, in terms of timeline. And
Mandalorian is rated R.
Right.
And the rest of that has been PG to PG-13. This is clearly back in the PG, if not quite G category,
yes.
but Hop level.
Yes.
And let's just start with, just to kind of ground it a bit, you're the one who got me into Clone Wars to begin with. What do you really like about the Clone Wars show itself?
So I like the whole ensemble, even like beyond ensemble cast. It's like an ensemble of ensembles. The sort of breadth of it. The fact that it doesn't just focus on one individual or one little group in their storyline. It really fills out the universe. But also the clones and how different they are from one another.
Yeah, I really think that's true, and I know this episode I think really highlights that.
Yeah.
And it was something that I love. I always think it's interesting when people say that Star Wars isn't very morally complex.
Right.
Because to me, it really is. Like it paints in black and whites of the dark side and the like.
Mm-hmm.
But then it really goes a lot deeper into showing all the gray that surrounds all that. And I always felt like the Clone Wars TV show really did in the Star Wars canon, one of the best jobs of that. That's part of why I'm super excited for this new season.
Yeah, even just in this episode, there's it's hard to not, get into superhero ethics sort of tone, but things like the droids. It's like the droids, they just go around killing droids all the time or destroying or whatever. And some of the droids, like the little ladybug-looking droids with the big red eyes, they're cute. And, and then, the aliens, too, are very, the original Star Wars movies, I think there's something to be said for the idea that, the Empire is, very human, and they see aliens as being very other, but in the Clone Wars, I think there's a little bit of a feeling sometimes you don't see a lot of humans in the separatist sort of camp.
Yeah, you see a couple. Dooku obviously I believe is supposed to be human. Some of the other some of the banking clan people like Clovis are, but mostly it's much more a whole bunch of aliens.
Yeah.
And you're right. And I will say it was one of the few things about this episode that I was a little disappointed by. The one thing I never liked about the Clone Wars TV shows is the way that the battle droids especially are just played as comic relief and laughs so much. And
while getting wrecked. Like,
yeah, exactly. And one thing I kind of liked so much about the TV show The Mandalorian is that in that the battle droids just look terrifying.
Yeah. It's a murder. It's a Terminator. Like, it's a Terminator. It's scary. That's a very scary idea, and they're played off as comic relief. Some of them are supposed to be more scary, but
yeah. And so when we had the Roger and pratfalls of the droids in this, I was not wild about that, but everything else I thought was. But yes, let's get into this episode. And just for a quick summary for those who maybe saw it a couple weeks ago, or just again aren't going to watch it but want to just kind of hear us talk about it. In this one, we find out that the Republic is in the middle of a big battle on a planet called Axios, I think. I want to say Axios, but that's not quite right. And they realize that they're losing the battle in part because it seems like the Separatists are somehow outsmarting them. They always know how to react to the perfect plan. Rex has a theory that it's because of that they have some kind of computer thing happening, and that it might even be Echo, one of the old clones who died early in the show, but has always been sort of fondly remembered and mourned by the other clones. Yeah. And so they assemble a team of clones, which includes a number of what they call the Bad Bunch, which were all kind of like genetic misfits or kind of misprints of clones, but in many cases where they tried to genetically engineer them and did great things, but also some bad results. And so Rex and Cody, along with this team of misfits, and one other two, what they call regs, regular clones, go behind enemy lines, penetrate into the cyber center, they call it, the place for the droid uplink, and they find out that there is the algorithm that they think is controlling all the droid strategy is a live signal coming from another planet that they think is connected to their missing person, Echo. And that's where we end. So yeah, what did you what's your take on this episode?
I enjoyed it a lot. I really appreciate that in the Return of the Clone Wars series, the first episode really focuses on clones, and not on Skywalker or, Windu or whoever else. In the original Clone Wars series, they had the first episode really, it's Yoda-centric, and I think in the original series, they kind of probably had to do something more like that to really bring viewers in. But it was very much still about those clones who were there. Who I think was Rex one of them, and Cody?
Yeah, Rex and Cody were two of the main people really developed in that show. Yeah,
so this episode kind of, I feel like sort of brings back that idea of, here we actually have a couple of clones that we've known for the whole series, and they're introducing this I thought it was Bad Batch, but...
Yeah, Bad Batch, right.
Right, so, and I think they're all voiced by the same guy, D. Bradley Baker, who's a legendary voice actor who also did Appa and Momo and other voices in The Last Airbender. My favorite series, now on Netflix. Anyway, can we say... Yeah. Anyway... This isn't sponsored by Disney, right? So
no,
they've had a little bit of a conflict with one another. But anyway, and I actually didn't hear his voice because I listened to it in Spanish and then German. But from what I understand, the clones should basically have the same voice, right? Or the same actor, because they're literally clones. But at the same time, there has to be differentiation between them. And so I think this episode made a good choice in terms of having these clones that are more overtly unlike one another. But that kind of really just sort of echoes the point that the other clones are also not perfect. They're genetic clones, right? And they had a very similar experience growing up, basically literally being bred for combat, which, that has its own moral questions. I wouldn't even say questions, but but no two living beings have the same experience, right? Even if they're experiences that are very similar, they were in physically different places at every point in their lives. And even if they were observing the same phenomenon, it's just not exactly the same. And so, sort of the fact that everyone's different, even though they're, nominally clones, even though they're genetically clones, I think was a really important thing to kind of reintroduce in this new season, especially since it's like so far removed from the previous seasons.
Yeah, I would very much agree with you, and I believe it is that exact same actor, and I'm thrilled they got him back because he is. The first time I watched this, I had to double check that it really was the same actor because he does so many different voices.
Yeah,
and in some ways that's perfect because it's the idea that all these characters have the same genetically engineered voice box and larynx and all that.
Yeah.
But that the voice comes out of the character. And there have been other scenes in the show where you had clones talking to each other and arguing with each other. But this one especially, like, it's probably 80% of the dialogue is the clones talking to each other.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't know how that works in the recording studio. Like, if you just do all the lines of one character and then all the lines of the other, or if he's just like talking to himself into a microphone for 10 minutes or whatever.
I mean, if it's the latter, it would be really fun to watch that, like, without the animation, I have to say.
God, yeah. But whatever it is an incredible bit of voice acting.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And it's, it really, I think, makes the show, because I feel like I often watch when I'm doing other, like, I'm focused on it entirely, but I'm doing things that don't require any mental focus, like washing the dishes or working out. And so sometimes my eyes aren't always on the screen 100% of the time, but I can always tell exactly which clone is talking.
Right.
And that, I think that's just a real mark of it. And I think you're right. It's a good way to start off the show again, especially because here, we are now at the point of the story where we're really getting up to the events of the last of the prequel movies, Order 66, in which the clones all turn on the Jedi.
Yeah.
And so I feel like having the clones start to, not be seen with the Jedi, but kind of doing their own thing. And in one case here, Rex wants to tell the Jedi about his suspicion about Echo, but chooses not to.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't even want to. Anakin thinks he's got something to say and
right.
for the secret.
Yeah.
I think it's a great way of foreshadowing that, like, maybe these two groups aren't as, kind of buddy-buddy as they once were.
Yeah, they're not so hand in glove. And yeah, that moment early on where Anakin's like, I know you have something to say, but he doesn't really press him on it. But it's just clear that he's got some suspicion, like, that he sort of feels like, I mean, it feels sort of like a Force thing because it's like, it's Anakin, but it could also just be like a, human read kind of thing. But it's clear that that's bothering Rex and that Anakin's like, there's something more, but that Rex doesn't want to say it, and that there's not maybe this level of trust of wanting to be completely transparent on both sides.
Yeah. Now, and just on that subject, so obviously it's building towards Order 66. This is Group 99. That's some fairly unsubtle foreshadowing, right? Or am I looking too much into it? Is it just that 99 is a cool number?
That makes some sense. I don't know.
Yeah. It could be. It struck me as really unsubtle, but if it didn't hit you that way, then maybe I'm just looking too much into it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I doubt it was accidental. I mean,
yeah.
In the German, it's like 99, which is like the number of red balloons, and but yeah, I mean, it is literally the same number upside down. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be curious, like, that's the thing is like that we're not going to like get an episode showing like what all of these characters are doing during Revenge of the Sith, right? Like, to me,
I doubt it. Yeah.
Yeah, like some of those things would be the most interesting. Like what, the characters that are main characters in the Clone Wars. Like, I wish that like the clone attacks had them in it. Instead of basically a bunch of just like random clones that I have not rewatched the prequel trilogy, but none of the clones really have any individual personality in either of the two movies with clones, do they?
That's correct. Commander it's either Cody or Rex. I'm looking it up right now, but I believe it it is Commander Cody who is featured. Commander Cody appears in the second movie, and when Order 66 is given in the third movie, it's given to Commander Cody.
Okay.
So he definitely does appear, and he definitely has a role to play.
I see. Okay.
But we're not so sure about some of the others.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny because what it makes me think of is, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I think you as well, have often said that it's like kind of frustrating that we have all these great TV shows that seem to appear in that world, but then none of those characters cross over. Like I really wanted to see like what Matt Murdock was doing during the Sokovia Accord, Civil War, and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally.
I feel like it's kind of the same thing here, and I get why it's hard, but it is a little. And in this case, I think the Clone Wars TV show, at least most of it, came after the Attack of the Clone, the third movie. But yeah, still, it would be nice to have a little bit more of that crossover. I will say.
You think after the third movie or after the second?
I think because I don't. There's 6 seasons, and I'm pretty sure there were not 6 years in between the second and third movie.
Right, but they're not necessarily. I don't think none of them take place after the third movie, right?
No. I'm just saying that might be why you don't have those characters appearing in the third movie, because they like.
Oh, yeah.
Their story hadn't really been told yet.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't surprise me that. I thought the Clone Wars actually started after Revenge of the Sith, did it, or was it before?
You may be right. I'm looking it up. So, Attack of the Clones was 2002.
Yeah.
Revenge of the Sith was 2005.
5, yeah.
And Clone Wars TV show. I know the movie definitely came out in between the two.
Oh, the Clone, yeah.
Yeah, Clone Wars TV show starts in 2008. So it's much later than all of them.
Yeah. And the Clone Wars movie really didn't actually highlight the clones very much at all.
Yeah, it highlights the idea that there are differences between them, but much more it's about, where it's just kind of a dumb movie, let's be frank.
It's just so much worse than the series. The series is great, and the movie's like,
Yeah,
for sure.
It's definitely true. And even, the series ramps up. Like, I'm going to rewatch
season
the entire
1's
series.
not.
The first season of the series is pretty rough.
Right, yeah.
But, that's, first season of Star Wars Next Generation was rough. That happens a lot.
Star Trek?
Star Trek, yes. Yeah. As the person who does a podcast on Star Wars, the frequency with which I mix up the words Star Wars and Star Trek is very high.
I'm sure that offends nobody, though, so...
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Certainly not that I started the Star Wars cast because my friends who do a Star Trek universe cast on the same Stranded Panda podcast network that this is on were bashing Star Wars a little bit, and so I felt they had to start this as a response. So it's great that I can't keep them straight.
Right. I think you should troll them on purpose by always calling Star Trek Star Wars on your podcast.
Basically the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Same thing. Same.
So when the clones got on the Enterprise, what did you? So anyway, what else did you like about this episode, or at least you think was worth commenting on?
So I think the surrendering droids and then Wrecker just killing them, like stabbing them in the back, literally in one instance, I think, is like, they're surrendering. Like, they're not, those aren't like fighting droids, right? But like, on the other hand, it's like they are probably able to transmit, like, I don't know exactly how all the technology works, but it seems like they should be able to transmit signal, like, right, without being like plugged into something. So, but I'm not sure. But so like I get it, but on the other hand, it's like it's just interesting how like depersonalized the droids are, and how how much the clones are people.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, especially because like if one of them, like Tech, or one of the one like who were had made an argument of, hey, wait a minute, like it'd be nice to keep these droids as prisoners,
right?
But we can't because they're going to broadcast something.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting argument,
right?
I don't think Wrecker has that level of high thought.
No, not so much.
They're the enemy. I kill them.
Right? Yeah.
Which I think at first I thought I was going to be annoyed by it. I think right now I'm really liking that character.
Yeah.
Because to me, he is exactly what the Kaminoans, created him to be.
Right.
Like, they feel like, we've already felt that the clones are a little bit too warlike. He's kind of like, what happens if we dial his strength? We basically give him like Hulk serum for a while.
Yeah. We just max out his attributes and
yeah.
Yeah.
But that also like, max down his, max up his rage.
Yeah.
His strength.
Right. Yeah. And it makes a nice contrast with the other clones. It's like, however, whatever you think of any individual, there's always another individual who can give you perspective
Right.
on, sort of what the ends of the spectrum really are, kind of.
Yeah. What's your take on Echo possibly being alive and where all that's going?
I feel like probably, I mean, like there's a bunch of different possibilities, but it's like that seems likely, and like maybe is like imprisoned or like basically, I don't know. I kind of picture him being hooked up to some machine type thing, that's like extracting, thoughts from his mind or whatever. That seems a little torturous, and like he'll probably die for real now if he's not dead, like in the next episode. I mean, I haven't watched it, but I mean, it's funny because I kind of was a little worried that this episode maybe wouldn't have enough to talk about because it pretty much just like sets up whatever's going to happen in the next. It's like that classic, part one, just introducing a mystery.
And like for people who haven't seen the show in 12 years or 8 years, whatever it is, bringing everyone back into the conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, I thought it was nice looking, and I feel like Anakin like looks a little different, but overall, it lines up pretty much with the aesthetic of the show, and it felt like a good start to I want to see where it goes. Like I want to see the next episode.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I will say about Echo, I have a hope, which I don't think the show is going to do, but I would think it'd be amazing if it did. Some of the episodes that I always loved most about the original show were the ones where it showed particular clones like questioning whether they want to fight for the Republic anymore. Like, acknowledging that the Jedi and so there's a part of me that is kind of hoping that maybe Echo is somewhat willingly doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
That maybe he that he feels like, the Republic left him behind to die, or that he and maybe he was like, force conditioned by the Sith, but like I would love it if maybe on some level he's willingly working against the Republic.
Right.
And when our heroes have to confront that, like at first they're like, "Oh, that's fucked up. That's terrible." But maybe that starts to sow the doubts that lead to Order 66.
Yeah.
And I guess it has always been my biggest one of my many frustrations with Attack of the Sith or Revenge of the Sith. Is that Order 66 seems to come so much out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so I'd love it if this was about kind of like the growing resentment and doubts among some of the clones. That was the thing that happened over the season. Yeah,
like the idea that that it's not just that they're like literally programmed with the microchip in their brain. It's like that there actually is some support for that. Like actually, like naturally, like that then they're not like, because in season 6 when what's his name? Like kills the Jedi, and then it turns out that he's got the chip in his brain, and after that he's not like just like, oh, I'm good, he's like all messed up, and maybe that's because it was malfunctioning or whatever, but I think it's also he's not just like accepting that that's the that like he did a thing that he was literally programmed to do, but then he wasn't really equipped with how to deal with having done that thing, because it didn't fit with the rest of his persona, with the rest of his mind, basically. And to your point, I mean, I love the Clone Wars series, but like, do you have a clear idea what the Clone Wars themselves are about? Like, why do the Separatists want to be separate? And like, why is the Republic so bent on fighting against that?
I do, it's. I feel like the Clone Wars TV show does a very good job of drawing it out. I wish they'd done it more, but the movie did a terrible job of it.
Yeah.
But it's basically, as I understand it, it's that it's a combination of two things. One is that it's the corruption of the Republic and of the Jedi, and the sort of growing sense of Coruscant as this corrupt, nothing gets done, nothing, all these little border skirmishes are happening and the Republic never comes to help them. But in some ways, actually, this is kind of a perfect metaphor of the American Revolution, but that it's also mostly being driven by separatist capitalists who, the banking clan and the trade federation, who want to be able to make a lot more money by by basically being colonialists and exploiting other worlds, and the Republic is holding them back somewhat.
Right.
And as for why the Republic feels like they have to, I think again, and I don't know how much this is what's really writing or if I'm headcanoning them being better writers.
Yeah.
But I think the implication is supposed to be that it's kind of we're a republic, we're always supposed to be a republic, and that part of the problem is that they never really stop and ask, should we be fighting this? And they kind of get carried along by their own hubris and their own sense of we can't be wrong, and that's exactly what the Sith are taking such good advantage of.
Yeah. And it's it's like the Separatists are clearly the bad guys because they're run by Sith, right? But we're told that basically by, although are they? They are, because Dooku, which is weird that it would be nice if they kind of had more of a clear separate motivation, which I think you just laid out pretty well, which is its own evil yet widely accepted motivation of people doing things in the real world, or nations doing things in the real world. But that doesn't make the Republic just good because they're the Jedi and they have the Jedi and they use the light side of the Force and whatever. It's it can be, it's violence against violence, and it really is, I think, fairly complicated. And the question of what side do you want to be on? The clones are literally born into one side, and the idea of one or some of them actually asking themselves, is this the right side to be on? I think is a very good question.
Right. And yeah, it comes back to, it's always been one of my biggest complaints about the movies, is that Count Dooku was a Sith who was working for Sidious all along.
Yeah.
Because to me, if Count Dooku is someone who genuinely believes in the Separatist cause and genuinely believes that the Republic is corrupt and screwed up, and yet has been manipulated by the Sith, that's such a more interesting story. And so
absolutely.
I would love it if I think by this point the Clone Wars is just about over, it's wrapping up.
Yeah.
But I would certainly love it if we get more of that story explored here.
Yeah, me too.
So we're at about 30 minutes. I want to kind of keep these pretty short, which for you and I is a Herculean task.
Yeah, no, this was a success, 30 minutes.
Yeah. But any kind of last thoughts or comments?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything that I was thinking. And...
Sounds good. All right, well, thank you, Paul. I'm looking forward to doing this again tomorrow. And for those of you who stuck around for this, thank you so much. We're going to try and knock one of these episodes out every day. We might miss a day or two based on schedules, but hopefully we should wrap up the full show in the next 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. I'll also say, if you're interested in other Star Wars content, of course, please check out the other things on this episode, on this podcast. You can also check out our sister podcast that we mentioned, that I run, the Superhero Ethics, in which we discuss, kind of go deep on ethical questions. We cover Star Wars, Star Trek, the MCU, DC Universe, Magic the Gathering, Avatar, which Paul mentioned, even Ozark, the TV show on Netflix. We're going to have an episode on that coming out pretty soon. And all of those, plus a whole lot of great other podcasts can be found on the Stranded Panda Podcast Network. So let us know what you think. You can find us on Facebook or Twitter. All that information is going to be in the show notes. We'd love to hear from you. If you've seen the next episodes, let us know what you think. We can read your comment on air and talk about it. Just please make sure to title it. So, you send an episode saying, here's thoughts about the third episode, so we know not to read it before we get to it ourselves. But yeah, that email, our Twitter, our Facebook, all that are in the show notes. Please check that out. Leave a review if you like us. And